From London, I'm John Weeks, and this is The Standard. Campaigners are calling for urgent action to tackle drink spiking, as figures show that more than 100 cases are happening in London's bars and nightclubs every single month. Data from the National Police Chiefs Council suggests the average age of victims was 26, with women targeted in the large majority of cases. Westminster had the highest number of cases in the capital. 2023 saw a 13% surge in offences, and the government is now set to introduce a new law to make spiking a specific criminal offence in Wednesday's King's Speech. As it stands, spiking is already a crime, covered by other pieces of legislation, but Labour's manifesto, alongside the Conservatives, said creating a new specific offence would help police better respond to incidents. Recently, The Standard's crime correspondent Anthony France joined undercover behavioural detection officers looking for offenders hiding among revellers, and he joins me now. So Anthony, some quite shocking figures around spiking in London. First of all, can you just explain really just how bad this crime has become in the capital?
Yes, well, the crime of drink spiking has reached epidemic proportions in London. More than 100 crimes are taking place every single month, and it has led to campaigners issuing calls for urgent action to protect victims who are often raped or sexually assaulted. In London, we've seen a 13% surge in offences. Over 1,300 were recorded by the Met last year, an average of 115 a month.
And it's staggering numbers, really. What kind of drugs do we know people are being spiked with?
So a lot of the times, people are being spiked with drugs that we would call innocuous. So 20 years ago, you may have heard of a drug called Rohypnol. Well, the Met haven't seen a single case of Rohypnol in the last 3 years. And we do know that more often it is common over-the-counter medication that is used in these offences. And also, a lot of the time, drink spiking could possibly be somebody offering someone, doubles, triple shots or something. We've also seen drugs as well, things like cannabis used in drink spiking where someone's put it in the drink. Over 100 different substances the Met labs have detected in a recent trial.
Wow, that's a lot. And I understand you've had a look at a few sort of case studies where people have been spiked. What have been people's responses sort of physically, biologically to some spikings?
Yes, we've spoken to victims and people who know victims. So obviously one of the most high-profile cases in the last year was the broadcaster Kate McCann, who spoke about the horrifying night that her drink was spiked at a club. Drink Aware, which is a charity, they estimate over 900,000 people have become victims over the last year. We've spoken to people who were sexually assaulted. We spoke to people who were being robbed, and we've even had cases in London where people have had their homes burgled while they were unconscious. We spoke to also the former Home Office Minister, Laura Farris, who spoke about a night that she went out in West London and her friend had her drink spiked. And she described the incident as really scary, and she got separated from her friend. And then luckily, they all left the club together. But she does remember the next morning that she woke up. She didn't have a hangover, but her behaviour was very consistent with somebody who didn't have any recollection of what had happened. And she literally didn't even remember arriving at the club.
And we know it's going to be made a specific crime. How is that expected to help?
So the government is set to introduce a new law making spiking a specific criminal offence in Wednesday's King's Speech. The crime is already covered by other pieces of legislation, including the 1861 offences against the person's actual bodily harm and the sexual offences. But both Labour's manifesto, alongside the Conservatives, said that creating this new specific offence would help the police better respond to incidents.
And I understand that the Met Police have got quite a grand plan in general to tackle violence against women and girls. Is there anything else they're trying to do or trying to implement to tackle this issue specifically?
Yeah, so we were very fortunate to go out with Operation Vigilant, which is the Met's plainclothes and uniform unit, which is flooding the capital's clubland to keep it safe. We joined them at a nightclub in the West End, and they have behavioural detection officers who look for offenders hiding among crowds of revellers. They say that some of these people, they carry out a kind of hostile reconnaissance before a spiking or sex attack in the same way that terrorists do. One of their tactics snared a 21-year-old man who was arrested for providing alcohol to a 14-year-old girl in Leicester Square. And they've also caught a man who was drugging other men that he met on Grindr, burgling their homes. He was jailed for 11 years in May.
And so for those of us who are going on nights out, Anthony, what is the advice generally to the public to avoid or deal with spiking on nights out?
So one of the big advices to prevent spiking is if you are offered a drink by somebody that you don't know, is to see where it comes from and also to keep an eye on your drink as well. Now, in some of the nightclubs in London, they've actually got these covers for drinks to prevent anybody, having their drink spiked. But also, I think the biggest one is vigilance as well, keeping your eye out for any signs, not just yourself, but anybody who might look vulnerable. And also, if you're in a nightclub or a bar, especially in London, there is now a code word that you can go up to staff and say if you're in trouble or feeling vulnerable, and you ask for Angela. And if you ask for Angela, that is the code word. And then the venue in London, there are over 800 venues in London that are all signed up to it. They know what preventative action to take. But generally, if you're going out with friends as well, make sure that you know where your friends are. Don't leave without them. And certainly don't leave without knowing where they're going, and just keep in touch and look out for each other.
Let's take a quick break. In part 2, our acting culture editor Nick Clark talks us through the London theatre shows you need to watch this summer.
It's a different performer each night, and they'll take to the stage completely unrehearsed and unprepared, and they'll read it cold. They have no idea what's about to happen, where it's going to go. They have to sort of trust the script.
Welcome back. I'm now joined by our acting culture editor, Nick Clark. He's been looking through some of the top theatre shows to watch this summer. So, Nick, you've compiled this list of effectively the shows of the summer you can see in London. First of all, are we blessed with a lot of good shows in summer 2024?
Well, actually, when I was looking down the list to see what we could put in, I've left out loads that could have made it as well. It feels like a pretty strong summer, I've got to say. I mean, 2024 in general, but often you're sort of conflicting with Edinburgh, the Fringe, and a hot summer. So theatre itself isn't packed with the best and the brightest. But actually this year, there's such great stuff to go and see. So I would urge people to head down to their local theatres.
That's it. And if we do get the nice weather so we can venture out of an evening to watch a show, what is the one to watch if you're looking for an A-list cast?
For me, one of the big names to hit the West End this year is James Corden. He hasn't been on the London stage for more than a decade, so it was always going to be an event. And it's a really interesting play. It's called The Constituent. It's at the Old Vic. And there's him, and he's opposite Anna Maxwell Martin. And the two are absolutely extraordinary. They really give powerhouse performances. I mean, it's a show that couldn't be more timely, really. It's about an MP who's played by Martin, who is sort of grappling with the idea of public service, and then she comes up against this sort of disgruntled constituent in the form of James Corden, and he's been sort of let down by the system. It's a really interesting play, and really you should go and see it just for the performances anyway.
And you've given one show the description, the controversial play to dissect in the pub afterwards. What is that all about?
Well, this is, of course, slave play. There's been a long trail for slave play. It opened finally last week after many controversies on both sides of the Atlantic. I mean, it's a show about race and sexuality, and it's really provocative. The playwright Jeremy O. Harris doesn't pull any punches at all, and I've got to say, it's one that will have you dissecting it late into the night. I mean, it stars Kit Harington and Olivia Washington, Denzel Washington's daughter. And in fact, the whole cast is extraordinary. And the issues it brings up are really punchy. It's a show that will definitely leave people with an opinion. There were walkouts the night I went, and I've heard there's been walkouts on other nights. Other people were laughing. There's definitely been a lot of praise for this play. It really is an extraordinary polemic. And, I would advise people go and make their own minds up, although it really isn't for the faint-hearted.
There's also one you've described as the show for those willing to take a chance. What's the story behind that?
Well, this is Echo, Every Cold-Hearted Oxygen. It is a play that's going to be playing at the Royal Court Theatre in Chelsea. It's by an Iranian playwright called Nassim Suleymanpour, and it's a very experimental work. Basically, one performer goes on each night, and it's a different performer each night, and they'll take to the stage completely unrehearsed and unprepared, and they'll read it cold. They have no idea what's about to happen, where it's going to go. They have to sort of trust the script and trust, which direction the playwright is taking them in. And really, we talked about A-list casts before. People like Fiona Shaw, Emilia Clarke, Toby Jones, Jessica Gunning from Baby Reindeer, Sheila Atim. Each night there is a different actor willing to take this challenge, to jump into the unknown. And so often with live theatre, it's these leaps into the unknown that can make for really electric nights.
And I guess it could be different every time, right? Anything could happen.
Absolutely. It's a different performer will take it in a different direction. So, whether people will be encouraged to come back multiple times, maybe they will, or just pick their favourite performer. It's up to you.
And the one I feel like I have to ask you about is the show you've called the best Broadway transfer that's now come to the West End. How is Mean Girls the musical?
Certainly the biggest Broadway transfer. I mean, it's... we all know Mean Girls stretching back to, I think, 2004, Tina Fey's very well-received film, and it's gone through various iterations, including a film of the musical that was on Broadway, and now we get the live version ourselves in the West End. There's been a lot of money gone into this. It looks great. It's still this arch, breezy musical, and the original bones are still there, but it has been updated as well. There are references to social media, things like Ozempic. It really is told through a 2024 lens. And there's some brilliant, absolutely brilliant performances in it. One that I just wanted to call out is Grace Moat. I hope I've said that correctly. But she plays Karen, the dim-witted friend of Regina, the queen of the plastics. But, I think no one is under any illusion what they're getting if they're going to Mean Girls, but boy, do you get it in spades.
Stop trying to make spades happen. You've obviously done quite an extensive list. There's obviously something for everyone. But from your list, is there a must-watch show, in your opinion? And if yes, why? Well,
I think many of them I would say are must-watches. The ones that I would really pick out, though, I'm going to pick out two. One is a sort of 20th century classic. One of the great masterpieces is Waiting for Godot. The play by Samuel Beckett. And it really has two heavyweight acting talents performing at the Theatre Royal Haymarket later this year. Lucian Masmati, who many will have seen in Game of Thrones or seen as Salieri on the National Theatre stage in Amadeus. And then there's Ben Whishaw, Paddington himself, but obviously this hugely acclaimed actor. And this play, it's witty, absurd, it's poignant, it's profound, and never has Waiting Around been so thrilling. So this is one that I would absolutely recommend. But another one I wanted to recommend might have gone under the radar with many of the listeners. It's a play called Shifters. It opened in February in the Bush Theatre in West London. Benedict Lom's this amazing two-hander. It's a sort of bittersweet rom-com. In fact, our reviewer called it pretty much the perfect bittersweet rom-com. And it just built this audience and ended up selling out. So many people missed it. And I would just advise you, if you missed it the first time round, couldn't get a ticket, or even if you haven't heard of it, take a chance on this one. It's an absolute gem, and it's coming to the Duke of York's Theatre and runs from August.
Pick up the Evening Standard newspaper for more news, interviews and analysis, or head to standard.co.uk. Thanks for listening. We're back tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock.